Good morning. I am Steve, and this is my Rock and Metal Life. And today we're looking at a pretty serious on this date. We're sitting here on May 29th, which is the 40th anniversary of Heavy Metal Day at the US Festival in 1983. And this was an event where I would say uh, kind of a coronation of the music that I like and a harbinger of what was about to happen throughout the 80s. This is early 80s, 1983. Um, all the heavy hitters were there. Well, not all the heavy hitters, but there's a pretty heavy hitting lineup. Uh, we got shirts representative of all of these bands, not necessarily where they were in 1983, but we've got Quiet Riot with the Mental Health was there. Motley Crue, they were there. Those were the first two bands that played. They were a little, they were unknown compared to everybody else. Everybody else was really well established. The third band that went on that day was Ozzy Osbourne, and kind of for his stature, I thought that was a little earlier in the day, but good enough. Judas Priest came out next, and very very fitting. They at that time they were as big of a name that was metal was taken over, and they were right at the forefront of it. The next band that came out, Triumph, one of my just personal favorite bands. I've made a video of them, a couple of videos of them already. How much I dig that band, and they were just flying here. They were really they really hit their stride, and they were just smoking along. Great live band. After Triumph, you had the Scorpions, and they were again, kind of like Priest. They found their mega status at that time. Very fitting to be the next to last band, and then the centerpiece of the whole thing was Van Halen. As we know, Van Halen got a lot of press for making the most money anybody had ever made for one show, and it was whatever, it was $1.5 million. If you watch the documentary about building up to the 1984 record for Van Halen, Van Halen News Desk has a couple of links out there for where you can see this documentary. At this time, there's two parts out, and along the way to 1984 was this. This was essentially after the Diver Down tour ended in 1983. Van Halen was scattered, and they were all brought back in for this huge payday, this huge event. And they did, in fact, they made the most money. They were in the Guinness Book of World Records. And they had the clause that said if you pay anybody else more, then Van Halen gets that much. And if you watch that documentary, the point I was getting to was, Bowie had essentially the same thing for playing on one of the other days. But it was, to me, there's a lot of articles out there about this is the day that metal took over. Vince Neil's out there quoted as saying, yeah, we smashed New Wave. We sent it back where it came from, and, rock and roll took back over. And that's, I think that's a fair assessment. So there were two US festivals. There was a 1982 one that doesn't really get talked about very much at all in my circles anyways. And then the 1983 US Festival, which of course, this was Steve Wozniak, and this was it was also like a technology fair. It was a 4-day thing, and they had a technology booth, and they were way out, in the inland of, east of Los Angeles, way out in the desert, and they had this huge property. It had a lake, and behind the stage they had amazing amounts of trailers and hospitality for the bands, and Van Halen had their own compound that had water around it. It was almost cartoonish from what you hear. But on Saturday, May 28th, they did a New Wave Day, and you got Flock of Seagulls, INXS, Men at Work, Wall of Voodoo, The Clash were the headliners, and they butted heads with Van Halen in the press, and David Lee Roth was more than happy to go back and forth with those guys, because the Clash was setting themselves up as not corporate and not flashy and not Van Halen. And David Lee Roth is, that's right in his wheelhouse. He's more than happy to get in front of a microphone and talk with those guys about that subject. So whatever. And then Sunday was the day. Sunday was the big day, and that was metal. Monday was New Wave Day, or whatever you want to call it. Actually, no, I shouldn't say New Wave Day. It was Rock Day. Monday was the New Wave Day, and Monday was Rock Day, and we got David Bowie, Joe Walsh, Los Lobos, Pretenders, Stevie Nicks, U2. And the reason I initially said New Wave Day is because Berlin, Missing Persons, they were there on that day, which, actually they should have been on that first day, I would say. But I don't actually know this, but I'm just thinking about it right now. Well, I don't know. I was wondering if they were like so big that they got moved over to that day, but that's probably not right. So then anyway, the following weekend, Saturday, June 4th, they had a country day. Alabama, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Hank Jr., Ricky Skaggs, Emmylou. That's pretty big lineup for those folks. But we're here to talk about Metal Day. And, it's just, I actually knew just one guy that went. I was a senior in high school. At this point on the calendar, the end of May, my senior year was all but over. High school was all but over. School was all but over. All we had really left was graduation practice and, graduation. And then at the beginning of August, I was going to go into the military. And I had signed up for the military in January of '83. So all the rest of my senior year and that summer, I knew, I was going to the military. I was going to be gone a long time, 6 years. And, so here my senior year's winding down. Plus I got this thing where, hey, I'm going to be in boot camp first, and then I'm going to be under the thumb and all that. So this is one I really wanted to get down there to the LA area and do this, and it was money and it was travel and it was where were you going to stay and all that, and there just really wasn't any viable path for me to get down there. But I did know one guy, and I remember he came back to school like the following Tuesday, I guess it would be, after the holiday, and he had the painter's hat with the US Festival and the US Festival logo and all that, and I was just like, and I remember I was drilling him on what was Van Halen like, how was it? And, the way he described it was like insanity. Not just Van Halen, but the whole thing. He said, you couldn't believe the amount of people. It's ridiculous. And, of course, I'd seen, the movie of Woodstock, and I thought, well, was it something like that? Well, yeah. Now that you see all the video and stuff, yeah, it was like that, very much like that. Not too long after that, I got the DVD that, well, it wasn't a DVD at the time, but I got a VHS of Triumph, their set at the US Festival. They put that out there. And for many, many years, that was the only video footage that I was aware of. And it seemed like it was really hard to get, especially before the internet. There just didn't seem to be any footage of all the other bands. And yesterday, Rick Emmett was in a Twitter space with Martha Quinn from MTV and Greg Renoff, who wrote the book Van Halen Rising, and he also wrote the Ted Templeman book. And he mentioned that during the space. He said that, we were the only ones that had the video. But then down the road, other people, he said he thought at the time people looked at their video and they didn't really feel like, that's not really us. It's a big outdoor thing, and, no stage show and all that, or whatever. Maybe they thought their performances weren't all that great. But anyway, when video becomes ubiquitous, with YouTube and everything else, well, all that video is out there now. All these other bands have their footage. You can easily get it. And I got a YouTube page bookmarked that's got, this guy says, hey, I've got essentially every video that I could find on YouTube from all 4 days, and so I got that bookmarked, and I was going through lots of stuff last night. But anyway, let's get to it. Quiet Riot, the mental health era, and they came out, according to what I got in front of me here, I think Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot had a 40-minute set and Motley Crue had an hour. And Quiet Riot came out with Danger Zone, and that's if you don't watch anything else, watch that. That's pretty cool how they come out on stage. Or the first band, a bazillion people were there. Dubrow and those guys, they're up for it. They knock it out of the park. So they start with Danger Zone, and then Run for Cover, Love's a Bitch, Come On Feel the Noise, Slick Back Cadillac. And then I don't know, set list says Let's Get Crazy, then it says Battle Axe guitar solo, and then it says Let's Get Crazy again, and then Mental Health. I would imagine they started Let's Get Crazy and did the solos. I haven't watched those yet, so I don't know. But then I think they finished with Let's Get Crazy and then did Mental Health. So that was those guys. Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love's out there at this point, and Shout at the Devil. I don't know if Shout was out or not. It looks like it was. Because Shout at the Devil was when I remember when I left in August to go to the military. I wasn't aware of Shout at the Devil. I used to play the crap out of Too Fast for Love. But then when I came out of boot camp, a couple months later, and we went to a record store, and Shout at the Devil was like on prominent display. And I remember I was surprised, like, hey, is Motley Crue big? Because they got a big display. And so they did Take Me to the Top, Looks That Kill, Bastard, Shout at the Devil, Merry-Go-Round, Knock 'em Dead Kid, Piece of Your Action, Live Wire, and Helter Skelter. So that's a mix of the two records, starting with Take Me to the Top. Interesting. Then you got Ozzy Osbourne, and this gentleman starts with Over the Mountain, Mr. Crowley, Crazy Train. I mean, this is just a bonkers set. This guy, kind of early on in his solo career. I mean, not really, because he's got a few records out, but this arsenal is just ridiculous. After Suicide Solution, Revelation, Mother Earth, Steal Away the Night, drum solo. I Don't Know, Flying High Again, and then he finishes it off with the Sabbath stuff. Fairies Wear Boots, Iron Man, Children of the Grave, and Paranoid. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of 7 bands you're going to see today. And that's what he brings to the table. Man. So then, I do believe Judas Priest went next. And we've got Judas Priest on, it's on Screaming for Vengeance. Defenders isn't out yet. And so they do the Hellion Electric Eye, Riding on the Wind, Heading Out to the Highway, Metal Gods, Breaking the Law, Diamonds and Rust, Victim of Changes, Living After Midnight, The Green Man Alishi, Screaming for Vengeance, You Got Another Thing Coming, and Hellbent for Leather. We're doing this all on the same day. It's a wonderful thing. After that, we got Triumph. And I've said it in my previous videos, I was such a Triumph fan, and I loved Never Surrender. Allied Forces and Never Surrender to me just, rise above their whole catalog, which is, the whole catalog's great, but those two are just so incredibly good. And, I feel like Never Surrender is my favorite record of theirs. And they come out with Too Much Thinking, and then they do Allied Forces, Lay It on the Line, Never Surrender, Magic Power. And if you watch the videos, Magic Power, the audience just in the palm of their hands for that one. A World of Fantasy, Rock and Roll Machine, When the Lights Go Down, and Fight the Good Fight. And it doesn't say it, but Rick did a 10-minute solo. Another great set. So now we get to Scorpions. And Rick Emmett said yesterday in the space that he watched the Scorpion set, and they were amazing. And I had heard that. At the time, hey, Scorpions might have been the best band out of all of them. And they are on the Blackout tour. So we got Blackout, Don't Make No Promises, Loving You Sunday Morning, Make It Real, Love Drive, Coast to Coast, Always Somewhere, and then we get back to Blackout with No One Like You and Can't Live Without You. And then He's a Woman, She's a Man, Another Piece of Meat, and then Dynamite, The Zoo, Can't Get Enough. Okay? So all of these things have just happened. And then Van Halen's going to come out and play 2 hours. And as we know perfectly well, for all these years. Mr. Roth was quite hammered. And, there's always been this talk that, it was garbage, Van Halen was trash, No, 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 no. I've been watching a lot of video of that. And even Roth, even, drunk, crazy Roth, no problem. I mean, to me, his silliness, yeah, it's a little cartoonish. It's like he's wearing the mask. He's so drunk and hammered. Edward Van Halen, absolutely on fire. I mean, just on fire. And does, like in the middle of somebody get me a doctor, he does Girl Gone Bad. We don't know that's coming out yet. We've never heard that before. Just that's a great set. That is a great set. That is Van Halen in all their glory. And if you figure in, they had scattered, and Roth, for crying out loud, was like in the Amazon. It was all they could do to get a hold of him to get him back here. The other guys were wherever they were. I can't remember. I've just heard this story in the last couple of days. I already can't remember, but they were all in different places, and then they had to bring him back in, and then they had to rehearse, because the Diver Down tour was over, and they'd put it all behind them, and they were all unwinding, and I'm sure they were working on new music or not, as the story goes, but they were all, they weren't together as a band. And so this set shows a little bit of, it's like the first night of the tour, and yet they're the mighty Van Halen machine. I got no problems with this performance, none. And Roth, you know who he is, his act, So on this night, he was really drunk and really acting silly. Well, I don't know if you're not along for the ride at this point. I don't know how that turns you off. And I really dug the fact that they were the kings of this whole circus. They were the centerpiece of this day of what I thought was celebration for my music. It's not underground. And hard rock and heavy metal is kind of cool when it's underground, like the way I like Metal Church right now, or the way I like Toxic Holocaust. I walk into any, Walmart, or I could walk around town all day long and say Metal Church, Toxic Holocaust, and nobody knows who they are. They've never even heard of them, don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And there's something kind of cool to that. I'd love those guys to be multi-billionaires and, all that. But, the underground part of hard rock and heavy metal, it's kind of cool when you're one of the ones that knows, you're, one of the cool people that knows what's really going on. When it pops like this, okay, now it's fraught with peril, because, there's going to be all kinds of influence that takes it in directions that it hasn't gone to this point. Van Halen, I don't think you really had to worry about that. Van Halen's problems lied elsewhere. They already had friction and all that, and we can get into the whole, how'd they do after Hagar joined the band, and we get into that whole mess later. But I mean, this is a day where the whole world's watching, and our guys showed up, and they did absolutely fantastic. These songs that I just read off, that's that's a wonderful page of history. I'm proud to say that I was around for all that. Not this event, I wasn't there, but those were the things. I was walking around as a 17-year-old. Those tunes were in my head. These performances were what I dreamed of. At this point I'd seen Van Halen live, I'd seen Triumph live, I'd seen Ozzy, and then all these other guys I was going to see them. I went on to see them a bunch of times. This is a good event, and if anybody wants to point and say, well, this is where I went commercial, after this we got power ballads and we got pop metal, yeah, I guess we did, but hey, this is, this is our day in the sun, that's what this was, if you ask me. And it's something to celebrate, man. And obviously I'm not, I don't want to in any way make it sound like I don't care about Memorial Day in the military. I know what Memorial Day is. I know what it means, why we observe it. And that's a very serious thing. It's very somber. That's very important. So I want to put all that out there before I say this. Every Memorial Day, I think of this, and I think of that poster I had of the Van Halen guys in the army outfits putting up the flag. Uh, like they were Iwo Jima. It said Memorial Day '83. This is something I think about every year because it's who I am. It's what I do. So yeah, again, not at all belittling the concept of Memorial Day itself, but yeah, this holiday, beginning of the summer, my mind always goes to this, and this has been a really great week or two of all these retrospectives and the Rick Emmett thing with Triumph, and Triumph that had a viewing party of the DVD, um, and we get to relive Van Halen, one of the craziest arcs in music, and I'm here for it, man. So happy anniversary, everybody. Happy 40th to the S Festival. Great, great event. I'm glad I was around for it. I wish I could have gone to it, but it's cool just being around when it was around and knowing what people thought of it and what was said about it. Good times.